I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Van Jones is on the show today. He's a CNN political contributor, and he was known for being the voice of reason for both the red and blue states during the 2016 election. Van is also the host of The Messy Truth and author of 2 New York Times bestselling books. He also has a new book out called Beyond the Messy Truth. Van is a social entrepreneur, and in 2009, he worked as an advisor for President Barack Obama in the White House. On top of that, he's a Yale-educated attorney, and he's been deemed one of the most influential people in the world, according to Time magazine. I've recently gotten to know Van, and I have a strong appreciation for his ability to serve as a bridge for opposing opinions. We need a lot more of that in this world. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. For me, being able to design my own day is a non-negotiable. As many of you know, I'm a bit of a time management nerd. So when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and more effective, I want to share it with everyone. So here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and I'm a bit obsessed. It's Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized, and I have a new sense of perceived control. My to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, and task is captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. With Monday.com, it's like I have a brand new operating system. There's no long list, and everything has its own home, its own deadline, its own team member that's assigned and associated, and it's color coordinated. We all have multifaceted jobs and businesses. There are many components to my business, and each and every one of them has its own compartment. Each division is always one click away. For example, my team and I have a dedicated board for this very podcast. Did you know there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast to air? It's the same exact process every time. And it's a system. We have the various key steps mapped out as micro tasks. And this allows for my team and I to stay in lockstep every step of the way. With Monday.com, I can zoom out and see the big picture, a roadmap view from 30,000 feet. And a moment later, I can zoom in and focus on a specific micro task within a project, within a division of the company. I could go on and on about the features that Monday.com offers, one of which is I've built my social media content calendar inside of Monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use, that I like, and it's embedded into my overall Google Calendar. Another feature that I love is the Google Doc integration. You know I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into Monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to Monday.com if you want a free trial. And let me know on social media how it goes for you. Shoot me a DM. We can swap tips and tricks. Van Jones, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Absolutely. In the spirit of why not now, let's hop in. And can you tell me about a time when you had to ask yourself, why not now?
Well, it's interesting. Really choosing to write this book right now was one of those moments because, this book is really trying to figure out a way to build some bridges and, get past the crazy and past the grief and figure out, a way forward for the country and for people who care about it. But it's not obvious that there's a big audience for that right now because, so much of the conversation is, either anti-liberal or anti-Trump. You got to pick your side, pick your team. You got to be for the percent. And I've tried at different times, to kind of like, well, it's a little bit more complicated and gotten just demolished, in social media. That both sides are just ready to pounce on you. And, but I just decided that I didn't want to be shouted down by my own internal fears of, maybe my progressive tribe misunderstanding me or drawing fire from the right wing. That at a certain point, you just have to say, look, this is not working. We got a big food fight in the country. The people who most need help are not going to get it in red states or blue states. Let me tell you how I see it. And that's really why I decided to, in the middle of what seems like a civil war, to come out with a book like this.
Oh, there's so much I want to dig into, and we'll get there for sure. And I appreciate that you are sticking with your most authentic path because it isn't easy. And I've witnessed, from both sides when you are that bridge and you are convening two opposing opinions, you're in the definitely in the crossfire, but there's no winning sometimes, right?
No, that's right. Yeah.
But we'll get to that. But when did you decide to write the book? What was the green light moment? Was it election night?
Well, shortly after election night, I noticed that it was like I was sitting in one chair on the set of CNN. I talked for, a couple of hours and along with my colleagues. And then the next morning, the liberals were very delighted with me because I had talked about how tough it was to be a parent and, trying to explain to your kids how somebody like a Donald Trump, who's a bully, we tell them not to be bullies, who is kind of bigoted, we tell them not to be bigoted, who doesn't seem very, very prepared or professional, could be the president of the United States. And the liberals just loved that. The conservatives didn't hear that at all. All they heard me say was white lash. Because in the same talk, I talked about how that in part, and I said in part, this was a white lash against a changing country and against a black president, because I think that also is a part of it. I also said that that wasn't all of it, and that was, they only heard the insult. And I realized that even when we were all around the same campfire on election night, that we can't hear each other. And we are in a place where, nuance and complexity and the messiness of the truth just can't get through easily. And I realized suddenly that TV wasn't going to give me the opportunity to have the rich and nuanced conversation I wanted to have. I was going to have to write a book. So, of course, immediately people were like, oh, the book's going to be called White Lash, and it's going to, really stick it to Trump, and it's going to be, and I, honestly, you talk to people, it's like, look, if I wrote a book, Van Jones, White Lash, the case against Trump, I could make a ton of money with a book like that. But I would also be adding to the problem because, yes, there is a dimension of the Trump phenomenon that is very troubling along racial lines, but there's a lot more than that going on. And I've been to Appalachia, and I've been to West Virginia, and I've been to Indiana, and I've talked to Trump voters, and I know it's much more complicated than just that. So I decided, okay, let's write a book. Let's not just do it the easy way. Let's do it the hard way, and let's see if maybe we can have a better conversation.
Well, I remember watching you give that very powerful statement on election night, and then I turned the TV off, and I I just had enough for the day. But like so many of us, we woke up and realized, wow, we are so much more divided than we thought. And sometimes when we realize the truth, it is the first step. It's just, at least now we know. I had no clue. But you really entered my radar before the 2016 election and during the campaign season, but you stuck out because you're often serving as a connector, as a bridge for opposing opinions. And that's so unique. And you're not Pollyanna, though. You're tough but respectful and injecting a sense of empathy. And the best proof I see of this, of you serving as this bridge, is looking at the endorsements of this book. You have like the most diverse set of people who are saying, no, read this. And that's from former presidential candidates from both sides that are endorsing your book. You've got Bernie Sanders, you've got Mike Huckabee. I mean, my question for you is, when you get heated and you start to feel yourself maybe leaning more one way or another, but you still want to kind of serve as that connector, how do you maintain that position? Because most of us don't, and most of us can't. How can we learn to do that?
Well, that's a deep question. Look, when you're trying to be a bridge, your feet are still on one side of that chasm. You're just reaching across, and so there's some stuff that I'm just not gonna compromise on. I mean, there's some stuff to me that's just too core. I'm not gonna turn on the Muslims and be a part of persecuting American Muslims. I mean, American Muslims are some of the best Muslims in the world and some of the best Americans that we've got. They got the lowest divorce rate, the lowest crime rate. They got the highest entrepreneurship rate. Every Muslim I know has either got a job or a business or a college degree. Why are we going to attack them? So I'm never going to back off of defending women and LGBT and the African American youth against the criminal justice system. Look, there's some stuff we're just going to fight on. But disagreeing doesn't mean we have to disrespect or disregard. And I think that what's happened now to the country is that we've gotten to the place where we forget, in a democracy, you don't have to agree. Dictatorship, you got to agree. Democracy, you get to disagree. But you don't have to disrespect, and you should always try to understand, even when you disagree. Understanding doesn't mean that you agree. But I want to understand. And when you start hearing people say, I'm just baffled, I'm confused, I can't even understand how these people are thinking this way, that's on us to be able to at least understand. And so when you see me on television, first of all, it may be the first time that you as a viewer has heard a conservative say whatever, outrageous thing they might be saying from your point of view. But before I got on that set, I spent hours reading right-wing blogs. I follow on Instagram and Twitter. I deliberately put in the search term white nationalist, right-wing, conservative, to make sure that my algorithm didn't just push me to more and more liberals to follow. I wanted to make sure that I consciously broke the algorithm so I could follow more people. So I've already heard a lot of these arguments bubbling up through the right-wing media before I ever get on set. So it's not my first time. So when they say something, you might be jumping out of your chair if you're a liberal, but I've already considered it. And it gives me the opportunity to say, well, you know what? I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you on these 2 points, but I still think you're missing these other points, and I want you to hear me on this. And I think it lands a little bit better because even my opponents on the right, I think they know that I'm going to call it fair. And I'm not going to go with a cheap shot, and I'm not going to just try to be right to be right. And it gives me, I hope, a little bit more space to connect.
That's something that I did do after this election, is open up my media outlet consumption beyond what I had been. And in your book, you have a whole list of the diversity and you're encouraging people, right? Follow this person and just at least be exposed to multiple points of view.
We still have to create some space somewhere for there to be some constructive dialogue. And the other thing, too, is sometimes we worry too much about words and too little about work. I think we should be finding ways to work together, whether we don't have to talk about all these issues, but when you've got this addiction crisis breaking out, when you've got kids growing up in broken homes, when you've got animals being abused, when you've got all these different things that are going on, let's just work together on some stuff. Because if we can fight about 80% of stuff, but you got to have that 20% where you're working together to keep the inflammation down so you still have a country. And so I am against abuse. I'm against bullying, but I also am against people having so low tolerance in their normal life. And the minute somebody says something, that isn't exactly where we want it to be on LGBT issues or on Black Lives Matter, your liberal friend shuts them down and goes all crazy and self-righteous. You see, that doesn't work either.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got to be able to draw distinctions. When somebody's been traumatized, that's different. But both sides now have adopted a style of communication that is fundamentally, I'm right and you're wrong, or worse, we're right and they're wrong. We're not even talking to each other anymore, and that has got to be balanced out. Sometimes that's okay, but what about the conversation that says only this? I want to understand you, and I want you to understand me. I don't want to agree with you. I don't want to convince you. I don't want you to convince me, but I really want to understand, and I want you to understand me. We've got to rebalance the national conversation so that we have room for that as well.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think social media just is not the most productive place, although most of us, that is the forum, right? So it's an interesting dynamic that we have, especially with what we're fed. Switching gears for a minute, let's talk about how you met Prince. I love this story in the book, and he was a very good friend of yours. I love the analogy of the Batman and Robin. Will you tell me how you met him?
I was running my mouth about the green job stuff that we were doing in Oakland, getting urban youth jobs, putting up solar panels, and got real passionate about it at a forum that I think Tavis Smiley was doing. And, he heard what I was saying, and he thought it was great. He tried to send me an anonymous check, which is how he did all his charity. But I didn't accept anonymous checks at that time and still don't. And finally, the guy who was trying to get me to take the check said, look, I can't tell you who the check's from, but I can tell you that his favorite color is purple. And then I said, well, you got another problem. I said, because now I'm not going to cash a check, I'm going to frame it. And he thought that was funny, and he got in contact with me. And, we just some people you just connect with. And he changed my life. He took me under his wing. I left the White House under fire for my left-wing past that Fox News just wouldn't shut up about. And I didn't have any place to go, and he took me in, and we wound up building Yes We Code together, which I talk about in the book, and we wound up just doing a lot of great stuff together. But mainly, I just learned what it means to be free from him. He was just utterly himself, with no apologies, and he looked at people the way a sober person looks at a drunk person. That was kind of his basic look at people. It was like, what are you doing with your life? You're only here for a short period of time. Be free, be brave, create, speak your mind, be yourself. Who cares? And I miss him every day.
When you left the White House and you then were speaking with Prince, and he suggested you take a little time, make a list of what you want to do, and then get after it, and he would help you. You mentioned that it took you a little bit longer than you thought it would to get to that point. Was there something that happened, a moment, a day where you're like, okay, I'm ready to get back in?
Healing doesn't work that way. I was born in 1968 in the rural South. My dad was born in poverty and segregation. He, put himself through college and married the college president's daughter, my mom, and, put his brother through college, his cousin through college. He worked with my mom to put me and my sister through college. So, I wound up going to Yale, and then I went to the Bay Area, and I'm working on these tough projects, and I'm winning grants, and I'm getting awards, and I write a book, and it's a bestseller, and I go to the White House. And so it's been a sort of upward trajectory for me. And then to leave the White House after only 6 months, under fire, it was just devastating. And even though I was, married and 2 little kids and, you know, landed on my feet overall, it was emotionally really, really tough because it regressed me back to being, a little skinny, nerdy, bullied kid who had found a way out of all that by just being really good at stuff. And now here I had this massive public failure. And it took a while. It took me a long time. I got some counseling. I went to something called the Hoffman Institute, which is like a 10-day retreat center where you really get a chance to go deep on stuff, which I highly recommend to anybody. You're doing like art therapy and punching, pillows and all kind of crazy stuff. Just try to get your head back right. And I had the support of a lot of good friends. But it gave me a lot of empathy for people because, when you fall, if I hadn't had all that support, I mean, everybody doesn't have Prince call them when they lose their job. And so as tough as that was for me, it ultimately worked out fine. But internally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, it was hard. And so, I feel for people who have gone through so much worse than I'll ever go through. And hurt people holler. And if the Democrats and Republicans get together and they pass bad trade deals and people lose their jobs, and they pass bank deregulation and people lose their homes, and they pass laws to build prisons everywhere and people lose their liberties, and they pass support for dumb wars overseas and people lose their lives, at some point hurt people holler, and you're going to get these movements like Black Lives Matter and the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street and Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. And it's up to people who maybe have benefited more than we've been hurt by all these policies to listen and to understand and to try to figure out a way to make things better, not just to turn our nose up and say, oh, those stupid Bernie Sanders people, those stupid Donald Trump people, those Black Lives Matter kids are terrible, and never listen to the pain underneath. And so that's really kind of what motivated me to write the book.
And a couple of rapid fire questions to wind us up here. What book are you reading right now? Do you have time?
Homo Deus, this book about how humans are, kind of basically melding in with technology and becoming almost godlike. It's called Homo Deus. It's a very powerful book.
And if you were to sum it up, one thing that keeps you up at night, I mean, it's probably pretty obvious given your what you've just said. But what does keep you up at night?
Democracies can fail. Most democracies have failed. And so I think both sides need to look in the mirror, Republicans and Democrats. You look around the world right now, you've got Putin, you've got China, you've got ISIS, you've got, a tilt toward authoritarianism around the world, and these new nationalisms and populisms bubbling up everywhere. Do we want to go along with that trend and become a more authoritarian, more divided country, or do we want to actually show that in a crisis, we don't have to turn on each other, we can turn to each other, use the genius of every kind of human ever born, which is what America is, every kind of human ever born in one country, and, prove that democracy can work. So that's my main commitment is to stick up for democracy in a time when it's not in favor.
Wow. Democracies can fail. It's such a strong, powerful statement, and I'm just grateful for what you're doing. So last question, what would you tell your younger self in terms of advice?
Oh, geez. Eat better, get more sleep, go to the gym more. Mainly that, like Twinkies are not food. Burritos are not for breakfast.
So when you're in a pickle, you have something that goes wrong. Do you have a comfort food that you turn to? Is it Twinkies?
Oh, well, not Twinkies, but not much better. I mean, I have a terrible sweet tooth. I'm really trying this year to break out of that. Look, man, I'm proud of my younger self. I mean, I wish I had a little bit better sense and a little bit more Nah, I don't even say that. Like, when I was young and left wing and radical and fighting the system, and I'm glad I did all that stuff because it gives me a way to identify with rebels all over the world, no matter what side they are, left, right. I understand how you can just feel so left out and angry with the failures of your country that you can get way out there. But I also know how important it is to come back home and to uh, take up the mantle of your parents and your grandparents and your great grandparents to try to make the country work. It can't just be F America all the time, left or right. At some point, it's got to be fix America, and it's doable. And we got great people here. But I think for me, my younger self, he wouldn't have listened to me anyway on the political moderation side. So I would just said, just please, for God's sakes, eat better, and go to the gym, and try not to leave your 40-year-old self with like so many problems.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for your time. And it means a lot to me to get a chance. The great thing about podcasts is that you actually can have a real discussion, because even radio, they're jumping in and out of commercials, and they gotta try to whip it up and make it entertaining. And it's like, let's just have like a real dinner table conversation. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?